Doctor, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you so much for being here with us. I know you have a busy schedule, and just for you giving us your time it means a lot. So thank you, thank you, thank you for that.
It is
So
a
what we're going to
pleasure,
do,
and it's my pleasure and honor to be with you.
so what we'll do first, we'll let you introduce yourself because we do not want to mess up your name. I'm very considerate of that because man, where I'm from North Carolina. There's some names that I just cannot pronounce. So if you could do that, introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get to questions and different things like that.
Absolutely. My name is Kazerounian. I'm currently a professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Connecticut. I was born and raised in Iran and lived there up to about when I was about 20 years old, a university student in Iran. And that is when my wife and I migrated to United States. And immediately after, it was because the reason we left Iran was the suppressive environment under previous regime, Shah's regime. We were university students, and we would frequently see that the notorious secret police that Shah had would come to the classrooms, take our friends away, and we would never see them again. So we migrated to United States. This was before the 1979 revolution in Iran. But immediately after the revolution, we became very active against the current regime, Khomeini's regime, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and because of that, we became political refugees in United States. And for the past 50 years, we have been in this country, which is a country we love. It's our adopted country. We studied in University of Illinois in Chicago, where I got my degrees, including my doctorate degree. And we moved to Connecticut, and as I mentioned, I became a faculty member, which I have been here for the past 42 years, including 12 years of it as the Dean of College of Engineering.
Doctor,
Beautiful.
let me, if I might ask a quick question. What struck me in what you just said is that you talked about the Shah's regime sound as if it was almost as bad as the Khomeini regime. Having lived under the Shah's regime and see what's happened in the last 47 years, is there much difference between the two?
Excluding numbers mean number of executions, or because it's a much larger population now. In nature, it is almost identical. And although Shah's regime was not a religious regime, but it was a dictatorial regime that survived because of the suppression and because of the tortures and imprisonments of the opposition people. And one reason, if we look at it intellectually and try to analyze this, one reason that we have Khomeini's regime is because we had Shah's regime. Because Shah, under Shah's regime, anyone who read a book, anyone who thought differently, anyone who was considered an intellectual, was either arrested or executed or basically exiled to, and actually Shah, one example. There were multiple parties under Shah's regime, and just one day, I was in high school, I was in 12th grade. One day, Shah's police came to the classrooms and said that everyone has to be member of a new party that Shah has created, and if Rastafi's party, and if they do not agree, they have to leave the country. Just one day, out of nowhere, every other party suddenly became illegal, and everyone had to become part of that party. So this is how Shah ruled, and it is because of that type of environment that Khomeini, a backward fundamentalist with this notorious culture that he had, was able to write an uprising and become the ruler in Iran and set the regime that we have seen what it has done to the Iranian people and to the region for the past 50 years.
Doctor, we have three lady guests here. And I'm curious, is the current regime more hostile towards women than the Shah?
I would say yes, it is. It's more restrictive, but again, I think that I say qualified yes, because under Shah's regime, there were certain civil liberties that existed. For example, women were able to dress as they wanted, and they cannot do that right now. But at the same time, respecting women as equals did not exist under Shah and does not, and certainly doesn't exist under the current regime.
I have a question because I vividly remember that history. And if I remember correctly, the Shah was in exile in France. And at the time he was chosen to come back and lead the country, a lot of us were asking why. Because we knew at that point he was going to be more strict and more religious than the Shah. We were hoping that the students or whatever uprising you had at that time would form a more, I hate using this word, democratic government. I prefer a republic where you have the rule of law rather than the rule of majority. And what you got was the rule of one dictator for the rule of another set of dictators, and still led by the same basic people in the background. I didn't understand that. Am I missing something?
So it's very interesting, and this is such an excellent question. What you saw from abroad, you saw Khomeini in Paris. What you saw from abroad, we couldn't see. Again, there was no internet at the time, and even if there was one, I'm sure it would have been restricted. And the newspapers were super censored. They were super controlled by the Shah's regime. So I was a university student. I loved to read, and but basically the foreign newspapers, we had to basically struggle to get an illegal copy of New York Times, part of it maybe cut in pieces, and between the students we would pass it. This is how much we didn't know and we didn't realize. As a university student, I have to confess that I was among millions of people that walked on the street against Shah's regime and probably called for Khomeini without knowing what is it that exactly we are asking for and we're getting ourselves into. Because of Shah's regime, we didn't know anything. We didn't know who Khomeini was. We didn't know exactly how democracy works. And again, just taking you back to a little bit of a history, Shah himself was exiled at some point through an uprising, and he was brought back by foreign powers and forced on the Iranian people. So Iranian struggle for democracy has been going on for now about 120 years. Even Shah's father was not democratically elected. He was put into, so both Shah's father, Shah himself, and now Shah's son is trying to do the same. They have come in through coup d'etats and not democratic means. And unfortunately, what you said, that you want basically everyone prefers a republic in which majority of people choose what they want. That has never happened in Iran for the past 120 years, and that is our struggle. This is what we want.
Yeah, I've been
Okay.
looking at your website. Go ahead, Vicky. Or is it Angela? I had my head down.
Well, I was going to bring it to where we are right now. I appreciate all the history and stuff, and we walked through a lot of that, giving our age. One of the things that I think a lot of people are concerned about is what's going on in Iran right now, and the fact that America is a part of that. So, how are you seeing this, and how do you see that what is happening now is going to benefit the people of Iran? Or is it going to benefit?
I'm sorry, go ahead, finish. I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm like, is it going to benefit? Is all that's happening right now going to be beneficial to the people there?
So ultimately, this regime has to go. No question about it. And I think that the civilized world has agreed now that this regime cannot stay. They're a danger to the Iranian people. They're a danger to the regime. They're a danger to the whole world. They're a threat, and they must stay. How, however, it is the how that we probably need to understand better. The legitimate resistance, there has been an organized resistance on the streets of Iran for the past 50 years, past 48 years. And I mentioned that this organized resistance wants a democratic, secular republic, one in which people can choose their own rulers, and one that it is non-nuclear and it can live in peace with its neighbors. However, the Iranian resistance and the Iranian people, the majority of Iranian people, have taken the position that neither war nor appeasement can improve this regime or get rid of it. War, definitely the war that is going on right now from air, I believe would not result into a victory for anyone. I think that the Iranian regime is trying to drag United States into an asymmetric, prolonged, unwinnable ground war. And the bombardment from air, I have mentioned in the past, that we can bomb the hell out of the country for the next 100 years and destroy every single structure inside Iran, and this regime would not topple. The only thing that would topple this regime is ground force. And just comparing to toppling Saddam's regime, Iraqi regime, in U.S.-Iraq war, the U.S. needed hundreds of thousands of troops to do that. Iran is a country about 5 times larger, both in population and geography, and it is a lot. Its army is a lot stronger than Iraqi army was at the time, and you can imagine what kind of ground force it takes to topple the Iranian regime. So what is the solution? The solution and the path forward is to rely on the Iranian resistance, the Iranian opposition, and their organic resistance units on the streets of Iran. There is simply no other way to topple this regime. We all agree, I'm repeating myself, we all agree that this regime has to go. It is the how that we need to fully agree on.
Well, I was going to ask you about the Free Iranian Scholars Network. I think I used up half a ream of paper just printing out notes for myself on this one. So as I was reading it, you're trying to unite those that want freedom within Iran and outside of Iran to form a massive network to do more of a peaceful overturn of government rather than a more military term of government.
So basically, the Free Iran Scholars Network is a network. It's not, we don't call it an organization because we don't have a pyramid structure. It is a network of Iranian scholars who believe in these very simple terms. We believe in a democratic, secular, non-nuclear republic. So within that framework, any scholar can join us. Many have, and they can freely write their writings or put their videos, audios, podcasts on our website, and through social media they're distributed. Again, what we want is a democratic regime in which people can vote, very similar to what you see in this country. And it's something that the Iranians have wanted for 120 years now.
Well, then it brings me to a strategic question, because as nations change their regimes, especially if you look at the history of the United States, somewhere along the way has to be a core center of leaders that are formulated around that very basic ideal. Do you see in the future getting a core center, a Thomas Jefferson, a James Madison, a John Adams, a George Washington type of individuals out there to say, all right, fine, we're a core group, just coalesce around us and we'll lead you forward? Because I'm not seeing that at this point.
Mhm.
So National Council of Resistance of Iran, and if you Google it, NCRI, National Council of Resistance of Iran, is a coalition of many organizations and individuals. I think that this is right now probably about 500 plus members inside this organization, led by Mrs. Mariam Rajavi, which many American scholars refer to the Jefferson of Iran. So that is actually, ironically, and interestingly, you just mentioned that. Yes, Mrs. Mariam Rajavi is a woman, and the opposition leader, it is an armed opposition against the current regime, which is the only way to bring this regime down, is led by a woman whose whole life has been struggling against this and fighting against this regime. And the United States, actually, Congress last year, with large majority, wrote a resolution. I think it's called the House Resolution 166. It is one resolution among many, which with majority supported her position. She has a 10-point plan, which is the basics, the pillars of a democratic Iran, which part of it I mentioned, free elections, democratic, secular, non-nuclear, one in which ethnical minorities would have rights for self-governance. Women in this organization. Actually, it is interesting because women traditionally have been, including Shah's regime, have been second-class citizens. To correct that and to improve that, basically, People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, which is the central pillar of NCRI, National Council, are all the leaders, and there are hundreds of them, are women, which is very interesting, very unique in history. I invite you to check out their websites, and you will be amazed. And I would love to come back after you take a look at it, and we can talk more about it.
Awesome.
Angela.
I think that's very interesting. So what is the current state of the treatment of women as it stands right now? I know you said that there was a different dress code, and just what is the current state with this new regime?
With the current Iranian regime?
Yeah.
As bad as you can imagine it. First of all, note that as women cannot be, although women are majority of the university students in Iran, they are a small portion of the working class inside Iran. And at the same time, they cannot be judges, they cannot go politically, they cannot take positions higher than certain amounts. But basically, the civic laws are very much against them in the families. If they want to travel, they need their husbands or their father's permission, written permission to travel. Divorces are horribly against women. And they are treated like second-class citizens, and it is as bad as it comes. They are thrown in, actually, you probably remember there was a major uprising 3-4 years ago, and that started by women whose hair were showing under their scar, or what's called hijab. The hair was showing, so they were arrested, they were tortured, and there was one woman who was killed, Mahsa Amini, and that uprising was named after her.
Wow.
So I look at possible changes. Say we get the regime is done, they're ousted, everything is. What is going to happen? I mean, she has a 10, you say she has a 10-point plan. What I'm concerned about is a lot of times you can have a plan, but if a heart and mindset is not changed, you're going to fall right back into the same order. So my concern is, how do you get, how are women going to become more than second class citizens even under this plan? How, because people's mindsets have to change for that to happen. So I'm concerned, is that even doable?
This is such an intelligent question, and thank you so much for asking that. Mrs. Mariam Rajavi and National Council of Resistance of Iran and its pillar organization, MEK, it's called, have realized exactly what you indicated, the challenge that we have here. And I would put a few answers on the table in front of you on that, but it is a very involved conversation. One part of it is that Iranians' desire for democracy is now 120 years old. There has been numerous uprisings, tens and tens of uprisings over the past 120 years. Unfortunately, and obviously, it hasn't succeeded yet. But this struggle has educated Iranian people and has matured their desire for democracy. And this is something that we should cherish and we should capitalize on. Iranians would not accept going back to monarchy again. Iranians would not accept going back to a religious dictatorship again. And unfortunately, both the monarchy system and the current regime, with the minority support that they have, with the small minority support that they have, are controlling the regime. They have a tight control through armed thugs. But then again, if we get rid of them at some point, and we will, Iranian people will, then they cannot come back. This is one thing. The other thing is that the 10-point plan is for a transitional period of 180 days, 6 months, which after that, a constituent council would form, Congress would form, and would decide the new constitution of the country. And hopefully at that time, with the constitution that you so beautifully recited at the beginning of this program, would be one model that would teach us a lot.
Well, I'm sorry. I was going to say, you kind of like answered the next question I was going to ask about the MEK, which I'm going to mispronounce this, the Mujahideen-e-Khalq. Did I say that correctly?
Mujahideen-e-Khalq Iran, yes.
Okay, which I found very, very interesting because you've got this in place. So kind of like works hand in hand with Mrs. Rejavi's plans also, don't they?
They do. They are one of the organizations inside National Council of Resistance of Iran. They are the main organization, I should say. They're the largest organization. There are many other organizations. And this organization actually has resistance units that have been fighting this regime for many years now. And actually, ironically, right before the start of this war, 2 days before the start of this war, 250 a strong group of them stormed the headquarters of the supreme leader of the regime, Khamenei. Unfortunately, that they did not achieve their final goal, which was to get rid of him. And the beginning of the war, the headquarters were bombed anyways, and he was gotten rid of. Thank God. But yes, it is an organization that is capable of getting this regime. It has matured. It has learned a lot, and it is an organization that its leadership, its top leadership, probably the top 500 leaders of the organization, and it's a very structured organization, are all women for the reason that you asked that question. How do we know that the next regime and the next culture would give women the freedom they deserve and the equality they deserve? Because we are going through that practice now through NCRI and through MEK.
Doctor, I want to follow up on Angela's question, and when she asked about the women. I'm concerned, and I can only know what's going on from people like you and other people that I interview. But I think it's fair to say that the President of the United States has told the world time and time again, and me to a much lesser extent, but time and time again, how can we trust anything that they agree to? How can we trust that they'll do anything different for women? They won't be as brutal as they have been. I know you said there that the people don't want um, a prince or royalty ruler, but the tenets of the Quran and Sharia law are so ingrained of the 1,000-year history of this country. And they certainly, the current leadership has shown us recently that you cannot trust anything that they say. And we know that all the people, all but you in this particular group of people on the screen today would be considered infidels under the current regime. In fact, even under the Shah, we would have been infidels. And they don't have to keep any promise they make to any of the five of us at all. How do we know, no matter what they say they're going to do, how do we trust them? How do we get past centuries of the ability to lie and deceive and murder and corrupt infidels?
Mhm.
So basically, this regime is the manifestation of 1,400 years of fundamentalist backward ideas that were generated as part of this religion. The religion itself, I don't have anything against. I think people can have their own religion. The Sharia law is a backward understanding of an interpretation of this religion, and it has to be eradicated completely. 20 years ago, MEK leaders, and in particular, Mr. Muhaddisin, put out a book in English, and it's translated to other languages as well, on the dangers of Islamic fundamentalism. Actually, more than 20 years. It's probably 24 years ago. And at that time, MEK warned the world about the dangers of Islamic fundamentalism and how it is being spread inside the region. It was what you see inside Afghanistan, inside Syria, inside Lebanon, inside Yemen, inside Iraq. What happened with Al Qaeda? These are a lot of it can be blamed on Khomeini and his thought and his ideas and his culture. And I'm telling you, this is the worst. This is something. The Iranian regime, the Iranian culture, not the Iranian regime, but the Iranian people could have not grown beyond this without getting this malignant tumor out of their culture. It had to come out. It came out. As costly as it is out. Now it has to be eradicated. And I think that the struggle of the Iranian people for the past 120 years for democracy, for a secular government, for a peaceful government for a non-nuclear government is an indication that that struggle has matured. I hope I answered your question.
Well, sort of, but I'm skeptical because
Mhm.
all the people that you're talking about who would take over if the Khomeini regime was gone, have that 1,200 years of history behind them,
Mhm.
and how do we know? I know I'm not trying to be unkind here, but how do we know when whoever the new regime comes in, 60 days from now is just as bad as the one that left?
Right.
Because they've been trained and indoctrinated for 1,200 years. This is the way it's supposed to be.
So I'm going to, and it's a good conversation. I'm going, and if we actually have a debate on this a little bit, I'm going to ask you a question on that. There's more than a billion. Actually, I don't even know the exact number, but certainly way more than a billion Muslims in the world.
Mhm.
And I would
Right.
also argue that, like any other religion, there are various interpretations of it. And I would argue that history is full of examples of all sorts of ideological or religious dictatorships that depended on certain interpretations of their ideology or religion. And so, as far as the Muslims in the world go, what better way of leading to a modern, peaceful, democratic interpretation of the religion than a modern, democratic woman leading that change? And that is what we have right now for that region. And it is important that happens. It is important that this Islamic fundamentalism be brought out and be eradicated. But that cannot be eradicated by force. It cannot be eradicated by bombs. It cannot be eradicated by wars. It can be eradicated by exactly the alternative that you're suggesting.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, and I know I have said this before on many other programs. I think we're making a mistake, Doctor, because we are using our Judeo-Christian value system based on the Ten Commandments, the rule of moral law, of how we as individuals take care of ourselves and take care of our fellow man. I do not believe that Islam should ever be talked in terms of religion, because I don't believe it is a religion. And I see more and more people talking about the Islamic faith. I can understand it's a philosophy, it's a way of life, it's a culture, but it's not a religion, because we are thinking of it in terms of us as Judeo-Christians and how we live our lives based on a religious belief. But when you say I can kill an infidel because they're not a Muslim and I have no accountability to that, or if I take somebody's life, I get 72 virgins in heaven, those are things that do not make sense to us as Judeo-Christians. And I think it's a disservice to us to have the world talk about the Muslim religion when I don't believe it as actually a religion. I'll grant you it's a philosophy, it's a way of life, it's a culture, but it's not a religion. And so trying to convince those people to give up their history, culture, going back to my original question, and as all three ladies have asked you about women, because that's important to them, I don't see how. I have grave concerns that even if we get rid of the entire bad guys at the moment and replace them with your council, I'm very concerned that 1,200 years of culture and history will rear its ugly head when the next regime comes in.
So I'm not a scholar of religion, nor am I a very religious person. However, I would also find what you said as far as believing in killing infidels or getting 72 virgins. And I would also argue that large majority of modern Muslims would find this as ridiculous as you find them. And no, I would also tell you that as far as I know, Muslims consider Jesus and Moses as respectable as Christians find them. And therefore, I think that a better understanding, mutual understanding of each other's with the scholars is needed. But I would also argue that the interpretation of Islam, like any other religion, the interpretation of Islam in a modern democratic light is far more dominant than you think.
Well,
Okay.
I'm going to piggyback just a little bit,
Go right ahead.
on what you were saying, Dan, or what you were asking. Doctor, one of my concerns, I live here in Colorado, and we have a group that is wanting to build a mosque here in our city. The problem is it's 17,000 square feet, and they want the freedom to be able to have their religious calls 5 times a day. That is going to disrupt life for everyone that lives in that area. And it's a huge pushback by the people here in Colorado. Colorado is not the only state that this is happening in. And a lot of people are concerned about that. So I'm listening what's happening in Iran, and we want to get rid of the regime and all of this. But like Dan was saying, and I said it earlier, how do you get rid of the mentality of those 1,200 years to make those types of changes? Because it is spreading across our country. And I'm very concerned about it because, first of all, I don't want to live under Sharia law. I will fight that tooth and nail. I will not wear a hijab. I'm not going to do that. I like my freedom. But it seems that this Muslim ideology is trying to force Americans to do that. Because I know there's even states that are talking about enacting Sharia law. And I'm telling you, I'm going to fight that tooth and nail here in my state. I still have a concern what happens in Iran. Is it going to spread out to those who are in America who still have that mindset of what things need to be? I'm very concerned about that. And I have a lot of people that I know who are very concerned about that. Because we, just like we read our Constitution, that's what we live under here in America, or we should be living here under America. So if this particular religion, which we consider an ideology, does not want to do that, how are we going to continue the way we are here, even in America, even if something changes in Iran?
So
I know that's a big, but
I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
I know that's a lot to put in a question, but those are my concerns, and I think everybody on here is concerned about that. And what do we do? What can we do to keep protecting our freedoms?
Let me just interject one thing to follow up what Vicki was saying, Doctor. Most people don't know this, but in the state of California, there are 12, say it again, 12 Sharia courts functioning in the state of California, and that the Sharia law is the dominant. I was in Texas many years ago, and at Dallas, Texas, and there was a Sharia court, several Sharia courts in Texas that nobody knew about. I wrote a story about it, and it went like wildfire through Texas, and they finally got rid of them. But when you got 12 Sharia courts in the largest state of the Union, California, I think what Vicki is saying carries a lot of merit, is that their objective, and I've seen it. If I have another gentleman I work with on Tuesdays who's in London, and he talks about how the Muslims are taking over Europe and taking over the leadership and creating significant difficulty in trying to enforce their culture, their heritage, their history, and their laws over the English or the French or the German or whatever, and it's caused a total disruption in in those countries. I have the same concerns that Vicky has, and I see that we're accepting it, and I don't think we should be accepting it.
I don't think that you should be accepting it, and all the power to you to fight Sharia law, and I'm in that with you. And but I want to, rather than within a religious framework, I want to answer your question within a political framework. The Iranian regime for the past 50 years has been supporting thousands, I don't exactly remember how many thousands, but many thousands of such centers around the world. Definitely many of them in the United States.
Excuse me.
And I have research papers on that, I have documentations on that, and I can share it with you. Now, the question in front of the freedom-loving people in the West is, either you go after the epicenter of it, which is Iran, financial support. Iran actually has centers inside Iran that educates mullahs that would be exported to elsewhere to run these centers. Either you fight the epicenter, which means right now changing the Iranian regime, or not. Again, there are billions, there are way more than a billion Muslims in the world.
Right.
You can't get rid of them.
Right.
There are people, and I would argue that the large majority of them, if you walk right now into any hospitals or any university, you would find numerous doctors and numerous university professors and numerous lawyers and numerous educated people and engineers in this country that are Muslims and are born in Muslim families. So the large, I would argue, and I'm put in front of you, and we can continue to, next time that we get together, I'll come back with data. I will put in front of you that the large majority of people would be with you in their fight, in your fight against this Sharia law and these backward fundamentalist fights.
Well,
But
I want
that
to ask Angela a question.
Sure.
In your practice, Angela runs a nonprofit that helps women and girls. Are you running into any Muslim women or girls in your center?
No. Mm-mm. No, we haven't.
Okay.
Mm-mm. No.
Well, I wanted to follow up with what the doctor was saying, because I find our biggest problem here in the United States is media hype and engineered alternative methods of getting into our government. And this is something I've spoken out. I've been doing my show for 16 years. That when CARE went into our federal government and into local governments and educated our governments on how to treat Muslims in public interactions, I had a problem with that.
Yep.
We don't do that for any other culture. When I go and then I confronted two imams who wanted a mosque built in our town with my Quran in hand and challenged them on the surah that they were quoting and saying, wait a minute, you didn't finish the rest of the sentence because this is what the whole sentence honestly means. We stopped that. What we need, I think, here is to take that core of the, I'm trying to think of the proper propaganda that's coming out of Iran and other radical Muslim regimes and pull it out of the American culture. I think that's what your organization is trying to do and the MEK is trying to do. Am I looking at this correctly?
So again, could you repeat that last phrase of it? That is what MEK and Mike. So we are trying to get rid of this regime and this culture altogether. The Iranian regime has multiple advocacy, or they support multiple advocacy and lobbying group inside the United States. Some of them are American organizations, some of them are Iranian organizations, and some of them are organizations that are connected to these backward ideologies, and you mentioned one of them. And yes, I think, but at the same time, so I'm not in a position, and my organization is not going to meddle in internal policies and politics of any country, including United States. But at the same time, what I repeatedly say is that the epicenter of this fundamentalism, these backward ideas, is Iran. And Iranian regime must change, not only because of their nuclear threat for the world, but because of all these backward ideologies that are being supported financially and ideologically from Iran. That needs to change. When you cut the head of the snake, then we can talk about the rest of the snake and where they are manipulating. They're manipulating the region, they're manipulating everywhere else. I will actually share a research paper I mentioned to you on how the Iranian regime is exporting through all of these organizations that they're creating in the Western countries, in Europe, in United States, in Australia, in Africa, and elsewhere. There are all schools, mosques, actually some hospitals that they're creating, and the head of the snake needs to be cut. And this is where we are fighting for, and many Iranians are losing their life on this.
Well,
Doctor,
I'm
we have
wondering
So,
about,
Dr. Kaz, I guess my question is, as we're moving forward, thinking forward, and wanting a different outcome, what education, other than it has to change, what new education or ideologies, even around women, fundamental women issues, are being discussed to further that advancement? Like, because I do agree that if there's not new things happening, then people will revert to what they know. Does that make sense?
That absolutely does. And actually, as part of that is trying to understand what NCRI is and what MEK is. Within MEK, as I mentioned, now that there is an interpretation of Islam that says that no, women do not have the right to choose what they wear, what they want to
Right.
do, what they eat, what they drink, whatever. There is another interpretation of it that says that quite the opposite. Women can be leaders. And if you look at this organization, to correct that historical, I would say, disaster, every single leader inside these organizations is a woman to just correct that, to lead that change. And that is the best indication. Now, Dan, and I believe it might have been one of the other people here asked that question, then how do we know? How do we trust Iranians, or how do we trust Muslims to do that? These are the indications. They have been fighting with you far ahead of you. Because they have been suffering it, this fundamentalist culture and belief and ideology.
Got it.
And
Doctor,
that, yes, please.
I'm sorry, we got about a minute left. Tell us about what do you think is going to happen over the next 30 days?
Non-event. Again, I think that last time that you and I met, you asked me that question, and I said that basically that Tuesday, which was the end of an ultimatum, you asked me what will happen after it, and I said probably nothing. Continuation of basically a status quo, and I would say that the status quo and these negotiations will continue because the Iranian regime is an expert in dragging on and did these negotiations. They have been doing it for the past 50 years. The world have fallen for them. And right now, I do not still see that resolve that would stand against this. Bombardment from air might happen occasionally. That's not going to change anything, as it has not so far.
Doctor, we want to thank you for your generosity and time today,
Yes.
and we hope we'll have you back on again soon. Miss Vicky, take us home.
Again, Dr. Cass, thank you so much for being with us. You've given us some insight and a lot to pray about. But Moms Across America, thank you so much for joining us today. And as I always say, Moms Across America, you are America. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Kaz. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
We'll be right back after this message.